Hey everyone, it is Rob Ryder on Saturday, August 29th, 2015. And because of this very first section here, just what it says, this comes out of the Michigan election law, where it says peace officers and their duties to institute proceedings. So this has to do with elections in Michigan. It is hereby made the duty of any police, sheriff, or other peace officer present and having knowledge of any violation of any of the provisions of this act to forthwith institute criminal proceedings for the punishment of such offender. Wasn't that interesting? The reason that's important is really because nobody that you believe to be elected has been properly elected. Look at that a little closer later, but if you go to look for certain pieces of paper, they don't have it, so they weren't really elected. They did take campaign financing, but they didn't take the office, so technically that's campaign financing fraud. So there's all sorts of crimes that they're involved in for not taking the office. But I didn't know that this was in the election law where it says that peace officers have a duty. All right, so if you bring the knowledge to them, they have a duty to institute criminal proceedings. And so if you're in court, that black robe priest sitting there is not a state officer. They did not take the office by election. They're not using the name that they're registered as an attorney with. They're using a fictitious name. They're impersonating one. And it would be the duty of a peace officer to initiate criminal proceedings. So who the hell is a peace officer? Well, that's what we're going to find out. If we can. And then bring to them something that's blatantly obvious and say, well, here's what the law says you're supposed to do, peace officer, and here's an example of what they're doing. And we're going to come back to this page and look at some other things out of the penal code, which is what the peace officers are supposed to enforce, is the criminal laws of the state. And there's a lot of them that I did numerous complaints in the past just based on the penal code. And one of the stories I have in my past is I was sitting in video court one day, and for whatever reason I was supposed to be there, and I had sent 3 complaints to this particular district court, which I thought was a district court at the time. I've since learned, oh, this is really a private court. But in the court, the judge said, that she had spent a lot of time reviewing what I had put in, and, she made that clear like 2-3 times. And then she said, and it's not that you're not correct, right? It's not that you're not correct. I'm just not inclined to issue any warrants. So when you're not, it's a double not, makes it a positive, you are correct. I was correct. She's just a private court, so she doesn't fit the criteria of being what in Michigan would be called a conservator of the peace, because by the Constitution, the judges of the justices of the Supreme Court, the appeals court judges, and the circuit court judges, and then other judges defined later, whatever the hell it says, are all conservators of the peace, which ends up being a peace officer. So bear with me as we go through a little history and stuff, but I hope that if you have a family member who's a sheriff or a truly badged, oath-bound badged police officer, sheriff, or other peace officer, because those are, and that would be like the Michigan State Police, they would be peace officers, right? That the true governing authority are these peace officers who maintain the peace. Because the very first action in any crime is to disturb the king's peace. So this is old, this is just old law brought forward. And let's just take a quick look at what a conservator of the peace is, because that's what it's called in a lot of places. Could still be called the coroner, as it is in California. It could be called justice of the peace, conservator of the peace, sheriff, police, as you'll see. But before I forget, I've got so many things to talk about. I just want to show you something that people have been trying to find a remedy for a long time, and this is what it says in California. The coroner's office. This is in Riverside County, California. Sheriff Coroner, where it says about the Coroner Bureau, blah, 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 blah. Mandatory investigations involving any criminal action or suspicion of a criminal act in whole or in part. Nothing else needs to be said. The coroner has the duty to investigate criminal action or suspicion of a criminal act. And that's just as old as English law, because the coroner was known as the crowner, which was the king's officer, and he was the one who protected the king's property and held his pleas, which are pleas of the crown. And a plea of the crown is a criminal complaint upon which the plaintiff is the king, right? So the sovereign. And so you bring a complaint, and the state is the one that would prosecute it. So you bring it to their attention, and then it's not you who's going to do the court case, the state of Michigan or the state of California or whomever is going to do the court case, but the one who's going to initiate the investigation in California is the coroner. And, just go look at the history of sheriffs or the history of the coroner, Google those things and read it, and, we're going to look at it a little right now, but there's all sorts of stuff on it. You might find something you like to read better. Because they were also, after a time, also known as a conservator of the peace. So just because somebody has the title of a coroner doesn't mean they have the duties of a coroner. But if you are doing the duties of a coroner in Old English law, then you are a conservator of the peace in Old English law. Common law, basically. The unwritten law of reason. Common law is a law that existed before the Normans invaded. A conservator of the peace is defined as a public official authorized to conserve and maintain the public peace. Under common law, conservators of the peace may include judges, police, sheriffs, constables. They're all conservators of the peace. The king is mentioned as the first. Then came the chancellor, the treasurer, the high steward, the master of the rolls, the chief justice. As they go down, right, each of them has less and less authority over a smaller territorial jurisdiction. Sheriffs are ex officio conservators of the peace within their respective counties, and it is their duty, as well as that of all constables, coroners, marshals, and other peace officers, to prevent every breach of the peace and suppress every unlawful assembly, affray, or riot which may happen in their presence. A conservator of the peace, as conservator of the peace, police have long had the authority to order groups of persons threatening the public peace to disperse or to arrest without a warrant for the breach of the peace. Now, I know it looks like they're always doing it against us because they're taking orders from people that have usurped an office because they weren't properly elected. So when we tell the police, hey, these people aren't properly elected, they're the problem. Maintain the peace, right? It's an unlawful assembly. The whole, your whole bar association, your state's an unlawful assembly. None of those people are using the name that's on their license when they advertise for business. It is hereby made the duty of the police force at all times of day, night, and members of such force are hereby hereunto empowered to specially preserve the public peace, prevent crime, detect and arrest offenders, suppress riots, mobs, and insurrections, disperse unlawful, dangerous assemblages and assemblages which obstruct the free passage of public streets, sidewalks, parks, and places. All right, these are all the things we'd love somebody to do, and if you don't believe they exist, well then, there is no salvation. But I happen to believe that it exists, and I happen to believe that that's what we're supposed to be doing, and we haven't done it, and it's in the Bible, and we should do it, and, well, that's the way I read it. In fact, by what authority? Romans 13. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what's right, and you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. This is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. Whose authority? God's and no other. He said it. Well, the Apostle Paul said he said it. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means, we got to determine who's the lawful authority, because the other ones are usurpers of offices, and they lie, cheat, and steal, and they say, yeah, hey, we're the authority, do what we tell you to do. And they take you to private courts, and they buffalo everybody, but it doesn't mean the guys that are peace officers who went and swore an oath, and really went to do the right thing, and may have been led down the wrong path, not of their own choosing, aren't willing and ready to do the right thing if somebody ever points it out to them. I don't know that they know this stuff. I mean, I'm not going to say that anybody knows the kind of things we get into, because nobody else studies it. They got their own lives to live, right? Somebody like me, I have all the time in the world because I've already taken all my stuff. And as long as my lights are on and I can pay my rent, well, I'll just keep looking at this until I figure out who's the person I got to talk to. And, now I no longer believe you need to go to court. That's the wrong thing to do. I'm not trying to sue anybody. I'm trying to point out a crime and let the lawful government take care of the problem. Okay, so police officers are not and have never been simply enforcers of the criminal law. They wear other hats. Importantly, they have long vested in responsibility of preserving the public peace. Duties and liabilities of sheriffs as a principal conservator of the peace in his county, and as the calm but irresistible minister of the law. The duty of the sheriff is no less important than his authority is great. It's just, who the hell's the sheriff? All right, are we talking about the elected 10-star guy, or is it another somebody who's performing the duties of the sheriff? Right? So, and do we go to the sheriff directly? Because in Old English law, you would go to the coroner and he would take it to the sheriff. He'd put it in his book first, then take it to the sheriff. He was the keeper of the king's pleas. This is the king's complaint. What are you doing about it, sheriff? That was his job, to make sure the sheriff was taking care of the things that the crown wanted taken care of. And so, the chief forensic pathologist, whether she's doing it or not, is over the office that is involved in mandatory investigations involving any criminal action or suspension of a criminal act, in whole or in part. Now, I believe coroners are still used in, I think, Montana and Colorado, I saw, and California. We don't have coroners in Michigan anymore. Right? So I'm not going to worry about it. They got coroners in Illinois, and they say that they're conservators of the peace in the statute. Right? So we're checking on that right now. But it doesn't mean that somebody isn't doing the same duty And that duty is now fallen under somebody else called peace officer, conservator of the peace, right? It could also be a justice of the peace. And we used to have justices of the peace in Michigan, and we don't have them anymore. But it does say we have conservators of the peace. And that's the system always morphing itself to, to hide what it's doing. Those that are actually, controlling it illegally. They want to keep changing these laws and names and stuff to add to the confusion. But we need to be able to see through that, take a breath, and look through it. So, I don't know how much of this I want to read. But, in 920, we're talking about a royal officer should hold court every month to try cases, both civil and criminal. Right? So somebody from the state, not somebody from the local, somebody from the king's office. In response to loss of this collective responsibility, appointed for specific nights in each county deemed responsible for conserving the peace. And I believe that would have been back in the days when we were talking about the coroner. Because now it's the Norman invasion of England. The specific term, conservator of the peace, came into being upon the codification and expansion of the authority of the office under Henry III's son, Edward. Conservators of the peace were not only charged with keeping the peace, but they were also given authority to try, right, judges, to try certain offenses previously heard by the Reeves court. Well, that would be the sheriff's court, I think. Because what was the Reeve? I think that was, that's where sheriff comes from. Conservators of the peace appointed under Edward I were considered to be in positions of great public trust and social stature. Well, we need to find some of them people. In 1307, officers were appointed in every county in England as conservators of the peace. Their commission stated that they shall constantly reside in their respective counties, visit every place therein, and the king's law shall be strictly observed. If any disturbance occurs, the conservator of the peace raises the posse comitatus, arrests the offenders, and keep them in custody until the king shall further direct. Okay, so now what's a posse comitatus? Is that like the militia? Because in Michigan, we used to have a Michigan militia, and in the First World War, they were nationalized, and so they became the National Guard, and to replace them, they created the Michigan State Police, who are conservators of the peace, or so it says. All right, let's look at some of these other things real quick. So get through these. A law enforcement officer, Leo, or peace officer in North American English, is a public sector employee whose duties primarily involve the enforcement of laws. The phrase can include police officers, special police officers, customs officers, state troopers, special agent, special investigator, border patrol officers, immigration officers, court bailiffs, correctional officers, probation officers, parole officers, arson investigators, auxiliary officers, game wardens, sheriffs, constables, marshals, and deputies. Security guards are civilians and therefore not law enforcement officers unless they have been granted powers to enforce particular laws upon such as those accredited under a community safety accreditation scheme. Okay. Traditionally, anyone who is sworn, badged, and armable who can arrest or refer such arrest for criminal prosecution, well, that's considered law enforcement authority and a peace officer. The modern legal codes use the term peace officer. In some other jurisdictions, law enforcement officer. Okay, so some places it's called the peace officer. Let's say that's the common law jurisdiction, and in the statutory jurisdiction, he's called the law enforcement officer. One's in equity and one's in law. statutized law. I'm just throwing stuff out. I really don't care. I'm just going to go find somebody and say, do you fit the bill? Send them a complaint. Hence, city police officers, county sheriffs, deputies, and state troopers are usually vested in the same authority within a given jurisdiction. Contract security officers may enforce certain laws and administrative regulations. So like in Virginia, they have these guys that are called special conservators of the peace. And in Michigan, we have people that have limited police powers. Peace officers may also be able to perform all duties that a law enforcement officer is tasked with, but may or may not be armed with a weapon. Okay. Well, that would be like this is out of the Code of Ordinances for the city of Melvindale, Michigan. We're talking about the mayor, and he's the chief executive officer. But it goes on to say that the mayor, it shall be the duty of the mayor to see that all laws relating to the city and all ordinances and regulations of the council are enforced. Well, what are the laws relating to the city? Those would be state and federal laws. The mayor shall be a conservator of the peace and may exercise within the city the powers conferred upon sheriffs to suppress disorder, and shall have authority to command the assistance of all able-bodied citizens to aid enforcement of the ordinance and regulations of the council and to suppress riot and disorderly conduct. All right, so he may not have power over everything, but he's a conservator of the peace, and as you will see, hopefully, it'll show that, well, he can call the next higher level. All right, he can be call on the assistance of other able-bodied citizens who have more authority than he does. He doesn't carry a gun, but he needs to have the law enforced. So he can call on the sheriff, who can come into the city, because the sheriff has jurisdiction over the entire county. It doesn't matter if there's municipalities in it. The sheriff can investigate anywhere. So the mayor could call the sheriff. The mayor could call the state police. The mayor can call the FBI. The mayor can call whoever he wants to. He's the conservator of the peace. Okay. So, every state, well, I'm not going to say that. Let's just go with Michigan and Illinois. Within their government, see, this is a .gov, Michigan.gov. So this is the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards. These are the people that can tell you if somebody's a peace officer or not, because they're the ones that issue the certificate that says that they passed whatever needed to be passed for them to have whatever powers they have. And, so if you get a ticket, you may want to send it to these guys and say, I don't believe this ticket was filled out properly. Or you want to know if the officer had arrest authority. Right? Because if you got arrested and he didn't have the authority, well, he was impersonating a peace officer. And that's what we'll look at some of this penal code stuff about. So, let's do that. Let's look at some, like I said, this is just kind of bip, bip, bip all over the place. But, Illinois has one too. Let's look at that one real quick. All right, the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board. And this is really good. It says in here that pretty much any information that somebody gives them to become an officer is available by FOIA, unless they say in there why it couldn't be available by FOIA. So I really haven't had a chance to get too deep into these other than, well, these are the people that are going to say if somebody has the powers. Like in the Illinois statutes, it says a coroner has to go to training here, the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board. And, upon passing that training, well, then they have whatever powers went with that, which would be the power to arrest. I'm believing. And so we haven't really quite gotten to that level yet. Let's go ask the right kind of questions. This is all just putting everything kind of in an order to say, well, A, B, C, try that here, and then we'll try this here, and we'll try this here, and we'll try all these different ways that we can think of to try to identify a peace officer that will actually take your complaint and do something with it. Because when you put stuff into court, they just roll right over it. Right? So if you're in a foreclosure, well, the bank never lent you any money. They never signed the loan paperwork. The original loan document was never signed, the original application. The lender never signed it. There is no loan. Well, those kind of things are covered in the penal code. Right? So we can go point out criminal laws to a peace officer who's supposed to be the one who maintains the law and see if he'll do something with it. Right, but here's some, so here are just, this is out of the penal code. I'm sure every state has one. This is the criminal laws of the state. And some of them are really, as much common law written as anything else. They're not for a specific thing, but gross frauds and cheats at common law. You just need to point out something that would be a fraud or a cheat at common law. And see, common law, lowercase common law, that is the unwritten law reason. And so those could be the maxims of equity or the maxims of law. And the maxims of law. Actually both. And the maxims of equity say that no statute can be used as an instrument of fraud. That's why a judge can make a rule to say, well, I don't care about that law. You're using that as an instrument of fraud. And they don't have to pay attention to the law. They can just untie the Gordian knot. Cut the Gordian knot. Falsely and maliciously accusing another. Any person who shall falsely and maliciously by word, writing, sign, or other accuse, attribute, or impute another commission of any crime, felony, or misdemeanor, or any infamous or degrading act, or impute or attribute to any female a want of chastity shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. Well, that means to me, if you put in the newspaper that I'm a debtor who's you're foreclosing on, well, that's a malicious accusation. Because, you didn't do it in a state court, they're going to be doing it in a private court. Medicine, practicing under false assumed name. Any person who practices medicine or advertises to practice medicine under a false or assumed name or any name other than as his or her own is guilty of a misdemeanor. You know who they're talking about here? If you go into court, sometimes you try to fight something, they want to give you a mental evaluation. Well, is that doctor using the name that's on their license? Are they licensed? If it's not the exact name, that person's involved in they're practicing under a false name. If they're not using the name on their license, and forget if you're going to court for anything. If your doctor isn't using the name on his license, he's not doing it as a doctor. It's a false name. Assumed name. Right? So Robert Allen Ritluski, if that's the name on the license, had better be the one who's signing papers. Robert A. Ritluski doesn't exist. That would be a false or assumed name. Public records. All official books, papers created, received in any office are agency of the state of Michigan or its political subdivisions are declared to be public property belonging to the people. So if you read that some entity should have some records and you FOIA them and they say they don't have those records, well, then that should be a crime because you're saying that you're the county clerk and the county clerk's supposed to have this record. Or you're the register of deeds, you should have this record, or whoever they are. And they don't have it, well, that's a crime. All right, so you would take it to the peace officer and say, look, it says right here they're supposed to have this record, and they don't. And according to this book, the penal code, that would be a crime. Are you not supposed to enforce the penal code? Willful neglect of duty. Peace officer, a person holding public trust. And this is where you get them. When any duty is or shall be enjoined by law upon a public officer, or upon any which holding any public trust or employment ever willfully neglect to perform such duty, or no special provision shall have been made for the punishment of such delinquency, constitutes a misdemeanor. You can say you're guilty of a misdemeanor if you don't investigate this crime that I brought to your attention. Now, if you want me to swear to it, take my oath. Conspiring to commit a person to an institution for mental incompetence as is deemed a felony. Right? Again, this is they try to do this to Roe, where she would for a disorderly conduct charge. If there had ever been a charge, it was for disorderly conduct, which is a $35 fine at worst. Became, hey, we're going to put you in the nut house and charging you $5,000 and all this other crazy ass shit they do to everybody, not just her. That's just what happens. Well, that's a felony. Just need to point it out, not to the court, because that judge sitting there isn't a state judge. They're a judge over a private court. And I'll show you that in just a second. Abuse of a legal process. Any officer or person who shall willfully make an arrest or institute any legal proceeding or sue on any process for the purpose of attaining the fees or mileages that might be accrued shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. If somebody sues you for foreclosure, that's abuse of a legal process. Because the bank didn't lend you any money. And they're withholding your title. Right? There's things that weren't done in the closing. But this is one you got to pay attention to. What's a lawful tribunal? It means a tribunal created, established, authorized, or sanctioned by law, or a tribunal, or, right? So either by law or a tribunal of a private organization, association, or entity. To the extent that the organization, association, or entity seeks in a lawful manner to affect only the rights or property of persons who are members or associates of the organization, association, or entity. And that's what's being used against you right now. You're not in a lawful, a tribunal sanctioned by law. You're in a private organization. And you're assumed to be under their jurisdiction. So in other words, you got the state of Michigan, and it has a political subdivision called Kent County. That's the division of the state. But within the same geographical boundaries is this entity that's a corporate body politic called the County of Kent, established by a legislature, a private act of the legislature, established this entity prior to the state becoming a state, like, just the year before. Okay, so this County of Kent is the one that says, well, you're a member of our, you live in our county, so, you're one of our citizens. And they want to keep you in this black hole called the corporate body politic and not allow you to ever be seen in the political subdivision in the state, because, well, then they'd have to say, hey, you are actually a citizen of the state. Right now, your proper person, my proper person, Robert Allen Ritlewski, it's not civilly registered in the state. When you were born, your paperwork went into the black hole of the corporate body politic, which is in cahoots with all the other corporate body politics, which make up United States of America, which if you go look at the Treaty of Paris, 1783, I think it is, in the very first paragraph, King George III and his successors are the kings of United States of America. Not the United States of America, United States of America. If you have a passport, look at your passport, and it says you're in United States of America. All right, that's this other entity living within, or jurisdiction residing within, the political subdivision Kent County. But I don't have to be a member of it. It's just that they have me in there and they say that I am. And this is why when the brother here some months ago, when he went to court and he just asked him, well, is this a private or a public hearing? The judge banged the gavel and said, case dismissed, and headed for the back door. Because there are such things. Right? The penal code says they exist, but you just need to say, I'm not part of that. Where's the state tribunal? Okay, but then they got things on residential mortgage fraud. File or cause to be filed with the Register of Deeds of any county of this state a document involved in the mortgage lending process that the person knows to contain deliberate material misstatement, misrepresentations, or omissions. That would be your deed of trust or your mortgage. Again, it was never signed by the lender. In fact, the lender's name on there, to go even further, isn't the name of a bank. They may have the lender will be listed. He won't have signed it. But the name they put as the lender, if you take that name exactly as you see it and go try to find it in your Secretary of State's list of businesses authorized to do business in your state, they don't exist. All right? Material misrepresentation, and it's an omission. So the evidence is already in different files. False pretenses with intent to defraud. Jeepers. A person who with the intent to defraud or cheat makes or uses a false pretense to do one or more of the following. Cause a person to grant, convey, assign, demise, lease, mortgage land. Well, I believe that may have happened to your property. Obtain a person's signature on a forged written instrument. That may be like that traffic ticket they want you to sign. Obtain from a person any money or personal property. The use of any instrument, facility, article, or other valuable thing of service. By means of false weights and measures obtained. And false weights and measures. Now, I pointed that out because Roe had to pay she had to pay bail money. Did it with a check. Right? Them checks that got the box, peso sign, and then it also says the word dollars on it. Dollars with an S is a measure of weight. Okay? So that's what Roe paid with. And then because of the stuff we did, they had to give her back her bail money. Well, it didn't come with the word dollars on it. And they called it a bond. We only deal in bonds. Well, that's a false weight and measure. She gave them, a weight in gold, basically. $580 with an S. And that's not what they gave her back. Interesting. False personation. Peace officer, medical examiner, violation, right? So it's if somebody is trying to give you a ticket and they're really not, or they're trying to arrest you, they want to use the word detain, so you can't detain me. If you're not a peace officer, you can't arrest me, right? Call a peace officer. Because only a peace officer can arrest you, with or without a warrant. An individual who's not a peace officer or a medical examiner, and again, this is lowercase medical examiner. We may have an uppercase medical examiner. I don't know who that is, if that's the same person as this, but this is the common term, medical examiner, not somebody's title. And they shall not do any of the following: perform duties of a peace officer or medical examiner. See, I believe when they say that lowercase medical examiner, they're talking about the coroner. And in Michigan, the coroner's office is tied to the sheriff's office. They make that quite clear. Someday this all makes sense. But right now, it's like, okay, let's just find us a conservator of the peace or peace officer, somebody who we can take a complaint about a penal code violation to and say, you have a duty to enforce this law, and here's some of them. You have a duty to enforce the election laws, and none of the people that look like they're elected have been properly elected. As used in this section, peace officer means any of the following: a sheriff or deputy sheriff of a county of this state or another state, an officer of the police department, city, village, township, a marshal of city, village, township, a constable, an officer of the Michigan State Police, a conservation officer. You have to remember when it says sheriff's officer, right? If they could have an office called the sheriff's office in the body corporate body politic. But that isn't necessarily the same sheriff they're talking about in the constitution of the political subdivision. County, Kent County. The county of Kent may have a sheriff, but that isn't the sheriff I want. I want the sheriff of Kent County. Right? And so I don't want to say that somebody's not somebody that they believe they are, because, who am I to know? I'm just saying that there are two different entities in the same geographical jurisdiction. One is under the state government, and the other one is a body corporate body politic created by an act of legislature. It's a corporation. A person who wears, exhibits, displays, or uses any purpose a badge, uniform badge, substantially identical prescribed by the Department of State Police for officers of the department. Right, so now we're talking about the Department of the State Police, which they have their own uniform they wear here. And they're the ones who replaced the militia that was nationalized back in the First World War. And they're, quasi-military. Yeah, they have a highway department that's kind of separated. And those people only have partial police powers. But, they have this other group that are actually peace officers. Or so they make it sound. Right? So wearing a badge, that's bad news. A person who represents himself or herself to another person as being a peace officer, as used in the subdivision. Peace officer means that, as we saw before. You need to ask them, are you a peace officer? Right? You a fully qualified peace officer. Badged, oathed and badged. Under arms. Disguising with intent to intimidate. Now all these numbers here, these are the different, code numbers that are in this act. But if you wanted to find them as Michigan compiled law, it would be MCL 750-217. Any person with any manner disguises himself or herself with the intent to obstruct the due execution of law, or with the intent to intimidate, hinder, or interrupt an officer or any person in legal performance of his or her duties, yada, yada, yada. Solicitation of information as to employment, that ain't so important, I guess. Representation as a public utility employee, that's important to me because Consumers Energy, who everybody believes to be a public utility, is not a public utility. It's not even the name of a company that truly exists. It was ill-formed from the beginning. But Consumers Energy is not a public utility. And, well, why are they doing it? Because they're trying to commit or attempt to commit a crime. And they're trying to put themselves between you and the public utility, whomever that is. They're concealing who the public utility is. But I do know this. That meter that's on my house is in the customer service, not in the utility service. Well, why would the utility put a breaker or, a meter in my service instead of their service? Well, as used in this section, public utility means the utility that provides steam, gas, power, cable television, water, electricity, yada, yada, yada. Legal process, impersonation, false representation, or action as a public officer or employee. Did you know that an attorney is a civil officer? He is a public officer. He took a voluntary oath. And he's not using the name that's on his license. You don't have to have a license to be an attorney. I can be your attorney. I can represent you. But I can't give you legal advice. That will require a counselor at law. And if you look at their licenses, it says an attorney and counselor at law. That's what this whole piece of paper is about. So, a guy just told me this a couple days ago, right? He had to go to court for a suspended license thing. And when he got to court, and the judge said he was going to appoint him an attorney, he said, well, I don't want an attorney, but you can appoint me an interpreter. And the judge said, well, no, I'm going to appoint you an attorney. He said, no, you can appoint me an interpreter. I don't understand what kind of English you're speaking. And then the judge postponed the case for a couple months. Well, in that time, he had gone down to get his driving record from the Secretary of State's office and decided to ask, hey, can I get my license back by any chance? Now, he was in court for a suspended license, right? That's why they had gone there for. But now, they suspended it. They suspended the case, postponed the case. He's going to go get the record because of, I believe, because of something I talked about in the video that says you can, so why not go get a copy? But they let him get his license back. So I don't know if the judge changed something, but he said I was never able to get it back before, and, I was able to get my license back. So we went to court again. He said, well, my license isn't suspended. I got it right here, and they dismissed the case. Long story short, right? So they're simulating a legal process, and well, we just need to put a stop to that. That's really no different than asking, is this a public or private hearing? Is this tribunal a tribunal established by law, or is this a private tribunal? Because you don't have any jurisdiction over me in your private tribunal. Let the record show. Right? If you believe if there's an error in the record, we need to get it fixed. A person shall not impersonate, falsely represent himself or herself, falsely act as a public officer. Got that. Good deal. Lawful tribunal. Legal process means, right? So these are the things they can't do, right? Part of a legal process. Summons, complaint, pleading, writ, warrant, injunction, notice, subpoena, lien, order, other document issued or entered by or on behalf of a court or lawful tribunal, the other private court, or lawfully filed with or recorded by a government agency that is used as a means of exercising or acquiring jurisdiction over person or property. Well, that pretty much covers what it is, right? And so when somebody serves you papers for a foreclosure, well, that's a legal process. But it hasn't been properly done. And so it's a simulated legal process. It's an unauthorized process, a document simulating a legal process that is prepared or issued by or on behalf of an entity that purports or represents itself to be a lawful tribunal or a court, public officer, or other agency created, established, authorized, or sanctioned by law that is not a lawful tribunal or court, public officer, agency created, established, authorized, sanctioned by law. When you read the Michigan compiled laws about the district courts, when it says the 63rd District Court, the word 63rd is written out as words. When you walk up to the building, it's got a 63RD on it. It's not the same court as what's being talked about in the law. It's really not a lawfully constituted court. It's a kangaroo court. But the peace officers don't understand that. I'm not blaming them because I didn't know it either until I started reading on it, so I'm going to show it to them. A document that would otherwise be a legal process, except that it is not issued or entered by or on behalf of a court or lawful tribunal or lawfully filed with or recorded by a government agency as required by law. They don't put any court stamps on. There's no court seals on the damn documents. There's only a clerk seal. Right? If it doesn't have a court seal on it, if a warrant's been issued by a judge, it's going to have a court seal on it. That's what I'm saying. Show me the court seal. Don't show me some scribble marks. I want to see a court seal. If not, it's false representation. Or in this case, legal process impersonation. Where did it talk about impersonation? Where was that? Public employee means an employee of the state, an employee of a city, village, township, county of the state, or an employee of a department, board, agency, institution, commission, authority, division, council, college, university, court, school district, intermediate school district, special district, or other public entity of the state or of a city, village, township. And they're really not holding those offices, at least the elected people, because they didn't follow the election laws. False representation, licensed health professional, is a felony. False identification as an employee of a family independence agency is a felony. I don't know if it's a felony. Does it say this one's a felony? Maybe it's just a miss. Oh, there it is. Guilty of a felony. Unlawful representation as a firefighter, emergency medical service personnel. All these different things that they could be doing incorrectly. And if you want to know, especially if it's a police officer, well, then you go to somebody like this. Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards. Illinois law enforcement training, established by law to set the standards by which a peace officer is known. Embezzlement, here's my favorite, of property belonging to a person or part owner, violation, penalty enhanced, yada, yada, yada. An agent, servant, employee, trustee, bailee, custodian, attorney at law, collector, or other person, receives or collects in any manner money or other personal property that is partly the property of another, which is you, right? This is what's happening, I believe, in your foreclosure. Somehow he's getting some kind of control over property that you have an interest in. But so does the closing agent, apparently, because, they were supposed to be paid for doing the closing, and they never got paid because the closing never happened because you and the bank never came to terms on the loan. The evidence of that is your payments always went to an escrow account. Well, why would they be going to the bank? Because you and the bank never had an agreement. The bank never signed the papers. Malicious threats to extort money, right? So now where's the threat come? Well, we're going to put it in the paper. We're going to send you all sorts of mail, right? All sorts of things to extort your money. Extortion by a public officer. Well, that would be, in my opinion, that is an attorney. He's a civil officer. I don't know if that makes him a public officer, but he's certainly a civil officer. He took a voluntary oath. He's a civil officer. And if they extort, I think it's $50 or more. Is this where it says that? Greater. Provided the same public officer, salary provided, compensation, full services performed to him, shall willfully, corruptly demand, receive. Yeah, it was a different one that is similar to this. And this is interesting. Warranty deed, because they use this word in Michigan. If you own property, you have what's called a warranty deed that you believe has been registered with the Register of Deeds, but it's the all capital letter Register of Deeds. Use of the word warranty deed or similar words. Any person who shall print, sell, or keep for sale any blank forms of deeds containing the words warranty deed or warranty deed covenant own acts or any similar words printed or written thereon, unless such deed is in fact an absolute warranty deed. So what is an absolute warranty deed? And any person who shall knowingly use any such deed for the purpose of conveying title, unless the same is an absolute warranty deed, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. And so I think that the one they give you, right, it isn't really the true warranty deed. What is an absolute warranty deed? I have to find that out. Larceny. Property penalties total. A person who commits larceny by stealing any of the following property of another is guilty of the crime provided in this section. A deed or writing containing conveyances of land or other valuable contract in force. Well, that's what they're going to steal from you. Larceny by false personation. person who falsely impersonates or represents another in such assumed character shall receive money, other property, whatever, intended to be delivered to the party so personated, with intent to convert the same to his own use, shall be deemed to be doing so, have committed the crime of larceny. Well, all that money you put into those accounts to pay for your house that the bank never agreed to, that's your money. And some attorney who's not going to use the name he has in his license, is going to use a middle initial, is going to claim that it's his money. Apparently, because they're the ones who end up with it by simulating a legal process. Okay, so this just goes on and on and on. All these things that are happening. So, what I want to do before I forget, I just want to close with one more thing, because this to me, this is all really, really good. But let's get back to the original one, right? For peace officers now, under the Michigan election law, it is hereby made the duty of any police, sheriff, or other peace officer present having knowledge of any violation of any of the provisions of this act to forthwith institute criminal proceedings for the punishment of such offender. What could we look at to see if somebody may have broken the law? Okay. This is what it says in Michigan, right? So this is some more of that Michigan election law. Circuit Court Judge, Certificate of Determination by Board of State Canvassers. It's not the one I wanted. I need to make this a little bit bigger. View, zoom. The Board of State Canvassers shall determine which candidate or candidates for the office of judge of the circuit court receive the greatest number of votes and shall declare such candidate or candidates to be duly elected. The said board shall forthwith make and subscribe on its statement of returns, right? So that's something, whatever the statement of returns is. On it, they're going to subscribe a certificate of such determination and deliver the same to the Secretary of State. So there's this group called the Board of State Canvassers, who for every judge that gets elected is supposed to certify his election, subscribe on its statement of returns a certificate of such determination, and deliver it to the Secretary of State. Okay, let's go see if the Secretary of State has got a certificate for the circuit court judge. What else we got, though? The Secretary of State shall file in his office and preserve the original statement and determination, right, the thing just before, of the state canvassers of the result of the elections, and shall forthwith execute and cause to be delivered to the person or persons thereby declared to be elected to the office of judge of the circuit court a certificate of election certified by him under the great seal of the state. So ask the judge, where is your certificate of election certified under the great seal of the state? If the judge doesn't have one, then he's impersonating a judge. Circuit Court Judge, oath of office. Well, okay, now we get to the oath of office, right? Forget the oath. That's after the fact, right? What you want to do is go to the beginning, point out their error early, see their last. That's what Lord Coke said. I'm going to agree with him. Right? Go here and find this. Make him produce the certificate of election. By what authority are you judging me, Judge? You got a certificate of election certified by the Secretary of State under the Great Seal of the State, or is this a private tribunal of which has no jurisdiction over me? Judge of probate. Well, first you got to be a registered and qualified elector. That's for all of them, by the way. Incumbent candidate, primary election, incumbent filing, the county clerk, probate district, Secretary of State, an affidavit of candidacy. That's another thing to look at. Just make sure they put those in. But at the end of the day, the county clerk shall file in his office and preserve the original statement and determination of, right? So this is the same thing, except it's not from the state board. This is from the Board of County Canvassers. The original statement and determination of the results of the election, and shall forthwith execute and cause to be delivered to the person or persons thereby declared to be elected to the office of probate judge a certificate of election certified by him under the seal of the county. Well, that's a public record. So if that's what the Board of Canvassers are supposed to do, how does they do this? Or the county clerk shall file in his office and preserve the original statement and determination by the Board of County Canvassers that the probate judge was elected, and based on that, deliver to the person or persons thereby declared to be elected to the office of probate judge a certificate of election certified by him under the seal of the county. All right, so when they hand you the piece of paper and you look at the seal, okay, it's got a seal. Is it the right seal? Or, because they lie, cheat, and steal to the end. Judges of the district court. Not much, these are all pretty much the same, right? They all get the same things. They got to be registered, qualified elector. They got to file something, primary election, this filing with the Secretary of State, an affidavit of candidacy. The State Board of Canvassers shall certify the nomination to the County Election Commission. The Secretary of State shall file in his office and preserve the original statement of determination of the State Board of Canvassers, right? So this is like the circuit clerk, basically, of the result of the elections, and shall forthwith execute, deliver to the person thereby declared to be elected to the office of judge of the district court a certificate of election certified by him under the great seal of the state. Show it to me, judge. Show me your certificate. If you don't have one, you're not the judge of the state district court. I don't care what it says on the sign. These are the election issues to point out to our good friend the peace officer, who has a duty to institute proceedings of any police, sheriff, or other peace officer present and having knowledge of any violation of any provision of this act, to forthwith institute criminal proceedings for the punishment of such offender. And, well, what they're going to find out is, once they pull on the string, not only does this judge not have it, but the person who's calling themselves the county clerk wasn't elected. The guy calling himself the treasurer wasn't elected. The guy calling himself the assessor wasn't elected. The guy calling himself the township supervisor, he wasn't elected. The people over the school board, they weren't elected. None of these people are elected. Not a damn one of them. And so since they're not elected, they can't be considered the authority that the Apostle Paul was talking about, right? Because they're just usurping an office. But some people actually did go stand up there, raise their hand, swear an oath to defend, whatever it is. Okay. They're the governing authority. They're there to enforce the law, and here's some laws that need to be enforced. Okay, well, that was really, where I wanted to get today, I guess, just to cover some bases that whether you have a foreclosure or a traffic ticket or whatever you're dealing with, chances are it's a simulated legal process and it's being heard in a private court, which doesn't have to have any jurisdiction over you unless you consent, and we don't want to consent. And so I would suggest one thing is go try to find your election law and just see if it talks about peace officers or conservators of the peace or justice of the peace or whatever coroner, whatever name you could think of, who has a duty, violation of any provision of this act. Right? And as I remember, this was like towards the end, because it started at 001 and we're at 941, so it was towards the end of it. But all I did is, I had seen it, and I said, well, I wonder where else it says peace officers, and that was the only place in the whole law that talks about peace officers is that one act, this one little piece right here. And so, that's people I want to find to point out that the people that we're going into court for aren't really the judges and juries, and although they maybe think they're doing the right thing by hauling your ass into those courts, those are private courts, and they need to be made aware that they're private courts and they have no jurisdiction over us. So what record do we need to get changed that would make you think that this court has jurisdiction over me? Because it's a private court, at best. It's not the state court. Apparently there's a record that's incorrect, and we need to go fix that. And part of that is, another thing in this election law is they're not allowing you to properly register your proper person name in the township or city or whatever it is. Not that you necessarily want to vote, just to register that you're there to establish your domicile. They're not allowing us to do that. Okay, I'm going to call it good for now, and we'll have more later. Y'all take care. See ya.